In 2014, a man stepped out of a balloon more than 41 kilometers above Earth. At that altitude, the sky no longer looks blue. Instead, it fades into a dark shade that looks almost like space. The atmosphere is incredibly thin, and the air pressure is so low that a human cannot survive even a few seconds without a pressurized suit. Temperatures can fall far below freezing, and the silence is unlike anything experienced on the ground. Below him was a fall that would last nearly 5 minutes. If something went wrong at that height, there would be almost no chance of rescue. No helicopter could reach him. No airplane could climb that high fast enough to help. Once the jump began, he would be completely on his own. But what makes this story even more surprising is that this man was not an astronaut. He was a Google executive, and he was about to attempt the highest jump in human history. His name was Alan Eustace. For most of his life, Eustace worked as an engineer and technology leader. He spent decades developing software and computer systems that helped shape the modern internet. Eventually, he joined Google, where he became a senior vice president responsible for important engineering projects. Inside Google, Eustace was known for his technical knowledge and leadership. His work helped support infrastructure used by millions of people around the world. But outside the world of technology, he had another passion. Alan Eustace loved skydiving. For him, jumping from airplanes was more than just an extreme hobby. It was something he had spent years learning and practicing. Skydiving requires careful control, precise movements, and the ability to stay calm even while falling through the sky at incredible speeds. Over time, that passion led him to ask a question that very few people had considered seriously. How high could a human actually jump from? 2 years earlier, the world had already seen an incredible attempt. In 2012, Austrian skydiver Felix Baumgartner became famous for a record-breaking jump from nearly 39 kilometers above Earth. The mission, called Red Bull Stratos, captured global attention. Millions of people watched live as Baumgartner stepped out of a capsule high above the planet. During the jump, he accelerated faster and faster until he broke the speed of sound while falling through the atmosphere. It was one of the most dramatic moments in the history of extreme sports. For many people, it seemed like the absolute limit of what humans could achieve in skydiving. But Alan Eustace believed something else. He believed a person could go even higher. Instead of organizing a massive media event like Red Bull had done, Eustace chose a completely different strategy. He began quietly working with a small group of engineers and aerospace specialists. There were no global announcements and no major marketing campaign. The focus was purely on solving the technical challenges. Their goal was to design a system that could lift a human higher than any skydiver had ever reached. To accomplish this, they planned to use a giant helium balloon. High-altitude balloons have long been used for scientific research. These balloons are capable of carrying instruments far above the altitude where airplanes normally fly. But sending a human into that environment created new challenges. At those heights, the atmosphere becomes extremely thin. Air pressure drops dramatically, and oxygen levels are far too low to support human life. Without protection, a person would lose consciousness almost instantly. To survive, Eustace needed a highly advanced pressure suit. The pressure suit was one of the most important pieces of equipment in the entire mission. It had to function like a small spacecraft worn by a human. Inside the suit, the pressure had to remain stable even when the outside environment was close to a vacuum. The suit also had to regulate temperature, provide oxygen, and protect the body from extreme cold. Engineers spent years developing and testing the suit to ensure it could handle the harsh conditions of the upper atmosphere. Every detail mattered. The gloves had to allow movement. The helmet needed clear visibility. The oxygen systems had to operate flawlessly. If even a single component failed, the consequences could be fatal. In addition to the suit, the parachute system also required careful design. At extreme altitudes, the air is so thin that parachutes cannot open properly. This meant the parachute had to remain closed during the early part of the fall. Only after descending into thicker layers of the atmosphere could the parachute deploy safely. The timing had to be precise. Too early and the parachute might not inflate. Too late and the skydiver could reach the ground before slowing down enough. Everything had to work perfectly. After years of preparation, the team was ready. The jump was scheduled for October 24, 2014. The launch site was located in the desert of New Mexico. Early that morning, engineers began preparing the enormous helium balloon. The balloon was carefully inflated and attached to the life support system that would carry Eustace into the stratosphere. Once everything was ready, the ascent began. Slowly, the balloon lifted off the ground. At first, the climb was gentle. The balloon drifted upward through the lower atmosphere, 10 kilometers above Earth, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers. As the balloon rose higher, the sky began to change color. The familiar blue atmosphere slowly faded into darkness. From that height, the curvature of the Earth became visible. The horizon stretched in a gentle curve across the planet. Few humans have ever seen such a view. Passenger airplanes usually fly at around 10 kilometers above Earth. Eustace was now traveling far beyond that altitude. Eventually, the balloon reached its final height, 41.4 kilometers above Earth. At that altitude, the atmosphere is incredibly thin. The sky appears almost black. Above him was the darkness of space. Below him was the planet, stretching across the horizon. Alan Eustace was now higher than any skydiver in human history. After more than 2 hours of climbing, the moment had finally arrived. Suspended beneath the balloon, Eustace prepared for the jump. There were no cheering crowds, no countdown clock, just silence. The stillness of the upper atmosphere surrounded him. Then, with a single motion, he released himself from the balloon. Instantly, gravity began pulling him toward Earth. At first, the air was so thin that there was almost no resistance. The fall felt smooth and strangely quiet, but gravity continued accelerating his body. Within seconds, his speed increased dramatically. Faster and faster, he fell through the upper atmosphere. Eventually, he reached speeds greater than 1,300 kilometers per hour. He had broken the speed of sound, but during the fall, something dangerous happened. Eustace began to spin. In the thin air of the upper atmosphere, even small movements can cause a skydiver to rotate. Without enough air resistance to stabilize the body, the spinning can quickly become uncontrollable. If the rotation becomes too strong, the skydiver can lose consciousness. That would make deploying the parachute impossible. Fortunately, Eustace's equipment included a safety system, a small stabilization parachute deployed automatically. This drogue parachute slowed the rotation and helped stabilize the fall. Once the spinning was under control, the descent continued normally. As Eustace dropped into thicker layers of the atmosphere, the air resistance increased. Gradually, his speed began to decrease. After several minutes of freefall, the time had come to deploy the main parachute. Eustace activated the release. The parachute opened above him, dramatically slowing his descent. What had been an incredibly fast fall was now a quiet glide toward the ground. Below him, the desert landscape slowly became clearer. Mountains, valleys, and dry desert terrain came into view. After beginning his journey more than 40 kilometers above Earth, Eustace was finally approaching the ground. Moments later, he landed safely in the New Mexico desert. The jump had been a complete success. With an altitude of 41.4 kilometers, Alan Eustace had completed the highest skydive in human history. And unlike the famous jump 2 years earlier, the event had happened quietly. There were no millions of people watching live, no massive global broadcast. Just a small team of engineers, a giant balloon, and one man willing to step off the edge of space. Today, the jump remains one of the most remarkable achievements in the history of extreme exploration. A quiet engineer who rose higher than any skydiver before him, and then simply let go.